We are back for another Pay Practitioners panel. It is our 5th season, and I am breathing rare air in this room full of great compensation consultants and compensation experts. We are looking forward to, over the next 3 months or so, sharing insights, sharing our experiences, sharing our knowledge, sharing an hour with you guys every 2 weeks, every Friday at this time. And today we're going to go ahead and get started. It's the beginning of the year, our first Pay Practitioners panel of 2026. So we're going to get our crystal balls out and predict what's going to happen in 2026. So this is a brand new group of folks. Some have returned, some are brand new, but we are very lucky for everybody on this panel to be here. Everybody is an expert. And to kind of get things started, I would like to go around the room and ask everyone to introduce themselves. How long have you been in comp? Where are you working today? And if there's a fun fact about you you'd like to share, that would be great. And then once you go ahead and introduce yourself, I would ask that you pick the person that you want to introduce themselves directly after you. I'll go first just to kind of give you guys a feel for what I'm asking for, how we would introduce ourselves. I am Justin Hampton. I'm the founder of Comp Tool. I have been in compensation for about 15, 16 years now, and started Comp Tool about 8 years ago. I was born in Texas, lived in Seattle for 10 years, and now I'm working just a little bit south of Cancun, right next to the beach down in Playa del Carmen. Happy to be here, happy to be joined by everybody on this panel. And I will pass it over to Catherine Gombos.
Thank you, Justin. Good to be back and good to be here with this group of fine comp professionals. I'm Catherine Gombos. I am founder of Gombos Group. We've been in business since 2022, supporting organizations on all things compensation, job architecture, executive comp, sales comp. And I've been in the comp and talent space for about 15 years. I've spent some time in-house, and I am happy to be consulting and supporting a number of organizations through their different people challenges. Happy Friday to everybody. From a personal note, fun fact, I like to sing loud music with some friends. Average age in my band is about 65, so we have a good time playing good 70s music and things from all genres and decades. I will pass this on to, how about Kat sitting next to me?
That's great. Thank you so much. I am Kat Carlo, and I have about 25, 30 years in this field. I started my journey at Arthur Andersen and spent quite a number of years there as an HR business partner, moving on to talent acquisition. Thereafter, I fell in love with compensation and have progressively added to my responsibilities and scope within the amazing world of rewards in various industries at various business stages. And again, very thrilled to be part of this group. Many of you whom I know for, not to age ourselves, well over 20 years. So it's a pleasure to really see where this journey has taken many of us. And I'm currently taking a nice little sabbatical and working with many wonderful individuals like yourselves, networking, getting involved in a lot of AI training because that is coming fast and furious our way. And a little fun fact, as I was thinking about this the other day, dream big because it can happen. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jacques.
Thanks, Kat. Name is Jack, short for Giacomo, originally from Italy. I've been in this compensation space for over 12 years. I never chose it. I believe it chose me. I kind of realized on the way why that was. It was not just about compensation, not just about economics, which is my background, but it's mostly about human interaction, emotion, conflict of interest, and that's what really intrigues me. Working both in consulting at the beginning for 7 years, and then I moved in-house. And now I'm going through a career transition. And yes, unfortunately, that's what I chose myself, so I can't blame anyone for it. Fun fact, I guess fun fact is I don't have a fun fact, but I've been caught dancing at my desk a few times, exactly when having conversations like these. So I guess that could be fun. And with that, I'll pass it over to Ashley.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Ashley Coblin. I am the Senior Manager of Global Compensation Programs for LyondellBasell. We're a leader in chemicals and plastics industry, based in Houston, Texas. We have 31 countries globally that we are in charge of the programs for. So for me, I started off, I've been in compensation for over 10 years now, previously in finance. Like most of us, we had a little discussion with meet and greet with the board. We kind of all fell into comp, which is very common. What intrigued me about comp and what I fell in love with was what Jack was saying, the human emotion involved. I would say empathy is one of my strengths as well as the weakness as well. And just that human compassion, the emotion that goes with compensation. I think we've all been in the situation where we go apply for a job and it's down to the last interview and you realize it's, not the compensation you're expecting and you just feel kind of undervalued. So my motivation is make people feel fair for the work that they do. And that's what intrigued me about comp. And so very happy to be here, and I will pass over to Nancy.
I didn't expect that. So, hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Romanish, and I became a comp practitioner in the last millennium. And it was a crash course where I stood up the compensation function. So really fell in love with comp, but literally fell into it. After that, I joined then Towers Perrin, if that gives you an idea, and was a compensation consultant, a rewards consultant for over 20 years in the Metro New York area. In the latter part of my career there, though, I started really focusing on pay equity. It really intrigued me. And Ashley, what you just said just resonated because it was really about, how are pay inequities even happening if we're designing these great programs? So got really passionate about it. And then that's when I met Syndio. So I started working for Syndio, we're a company that helps companies scale smart and fair pay decisions. And I've just been continuing sort of that passion around it. It's just been an extraordinary journey. I think so much has changed. So I'm really excited about talking about all that with these great folks here today and about everything that we're thinking is going to continue to change.
Well, I guess that leaves me now.
Yep, over to you, Jason.
So I'm Jason Smith. I'm a principal consultant at Gallagher. I've been in compensation since 2006 when I tripped and fell into it. So yeah, it's been a journey. I've got a marketing degree, so still not sure what I'm doing here, but actually it's paying off in this consulting role now. I've been with Gallagher for 2 years, but I've been in industry for the 18, 19 years before that, doing comp work in all types of industries. I'm based in Columbia, South Carolina. I guess one fun fact about me is that I worked for 2 companies twice. So that's a hard thing to do, but I managed to do it. And you will probably hear me say several times this season, you get what you pay for. So that's my favorite compensation saying. So that's it.
Well, I think everyone can now see why I'm so excited to be on this panel because we've got great folks on here. So again, today's topic is around what should comp teams start preparing for in 2026 and what should we be aware of? And I want to just throw this one. I actually want to throw this one over to Jason. So Jason, as we've been really kind of starting to ramp up, we're in the first 2 weeks of 2026. What have you heard is the top of mind for your clients, and where are they really kind of prioritizing their focus this early in the year to get ready for 2026?
Structure. They all want structure, and job architecture is the biggest buzzword right now. Now, granted, most of my clients are not compensation folks; they're HR folks. So, but yes, even from the C-suite down to the chief HR officers, they all want structure, and they need it because I have had some doozies of job architecture projects that I've worked on lately, where everything is really all over the place, and so When you've got 20 people with the title of vice president, and that's it, I don't really know what they do. So yes, and the companies crave this stuff. They knew that it was, messed up before they came to me. But structure is really structure and guardrails for the leaders to make sure that their leaders are doing things the right way. So, and that they have all the tools that they need to be able to manage pay on their level. So yeah, just structure. That's big. Job architecture is huge right now.
+1 on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Catherine, you're seeing a lot of your clients focusing on building out pay structures at this time.
Yeah, I think it's about kind of taking a step back and being intentional about it, right? Instead of sort of reactive to the market and just kind of chasing that P50 year over year, we're sort of stepping back and saying, do we have the proper job design, career pathing, career webbing, right? How do we get folks to expand their experience, not just climb through their experience, and building that foundation so that we can communicate clearly, so that we can report and be compliant, and so that we're really just, again, prioritizing the human at work. As Ashley and Nancy said, just making sure that we're being fair, and taking that off the table so that folks get double down on the mission and really drive fast towards whatever the organizational goals are. So I'm seeing absolutely a lot of conversations around that strategic alignment on job design and the talent market.
Yeah, I would second that as well. And in addition to that, it's okay, now that we've done this and I've spent so much time with your rewards team and comp, how do I communicate this? What does this mean? Why do we do this? And how can I confidently engage all of the different employees at different stages in their lives, in their performance cycles? How do I tell them? Because they're talking to one another. Folks are being so much more open than I've ever seen in 25 years about, how they're being paid, what they're being paid, what their ratings are, how their ratings came about, and how those discussions were handled. So the question really is, now that I've waited 2-3 years for this job architecture that I may or may not fully trust, how do I communicate what comes with it? And then what I'm seeing too, in addition and beyond from pay, and let's not even talk about bonus at this point, right? Because that's a whole other bit of a black box for many organizations and leaders in terms of explaining that and also accepting their own bonuses, is the holistic well-being that their employees and that generation that has now become the majority within those companies is asking for. And so that is a whole other layer that it is critically important, really truly reflects the human aspect. It's the noble and right thing to do for organizations to really keep in mind while we are doing these pay processes or decisions, what else is happening from a holistic well-being perspective. And by well-being, is not just mental health and your medical, it's about financial health, it's about your home health, it's about your environmental health, right? We're being asked to consider all of these additional aspects. And I'm going to top it off there. And I know that many of you have a lot of commentary around that, but please tell me how AI is going to make this easier for us to partner together and to drive this. And I'm sure we'll get to AI shortly, but that's what I'm seeing a lot of as well.
And Kat, I really like your point about the communications with job architecture, because that piece is missing a lot. Who's the stakeholders? Who should be involved? The other piece of that too, especially when you get into cost conscious climate, such as like the energy sector right now, your stakeholders may ask you, well, how is the job architecture going to save us money? Well, it's not going to save us money, but once you have that, guardrails and everything in place for your job architecture, then you can start building meaningful salary administrations behind that. And that's where, you're solid on your compensation philosophy, where you want to be in the market, how you want to pay people coming in, where you want to pay people within the range. And so I think that's another important piece when it comes to job architecture, is really understanding your comp philosophy and also building out those salary administrations tools for your managers, for your clients, for your employees to understand that as well.
Ashley, actually, it's funny. Just today, I did see a statistic. It was put out by Mercer around saving money with your job architecture, an ROI stat, because a company had discovered that they had misleveled folks. So I think it does go to, like, what you're saying is what Jason was even saying, right, around just that governance piece. So I think, having something that you can scale consistently, I think that's really the key, is making sure that those decisions are happening more and more finely. But I think all the communication discussion as well, Kat and Catherine, I mean, it's that I was on a call earlier today talking exactly about that. I think what we've been talking about with a lot of our folks is EU Pay Transparency Directive, and just sort of this level of transparency that folks haven't seen before. I guess what I'd be interested from this group is if you're seeing what I'm seeing, which is, we're finally, I think for years we kind of scaled the global job architecture. We talked about it as, it's holistic and everybody's on the same page. And so there's a benefit to that. And I can tell you personally, for me anyway, we kind of over-indexed on that. It was kind of like, oh, we can totally do this all across the globe, no problem. And now that local relevance is really popping up, where it has to be much more nuanced nowadays. So I'm seeing, for example, companies are, they have a global pay transparency strategy, but they're really making it a difference between, well, this is what we're doing in the US, this is what we're doing in the EU. We literally have to talk about things like differently. So how do we have some kind of overarching narrative that applies? We've got folks in China, we've got folks in Brazil, so we have to we value people the same. These are our principles, but in the EU, we're going to talk about it from a total remuneration perspective. This is how we contextualize that information. We're focused on pay gaps. Over here in the US, we're talking about it differently. So all of those nuances, I do think, like Jason, honestly, I'm jealous of your marketing degree, because I feel like compensation, we have to be marketers now of compensation programs. We have to find ways to market what we do.
I mean, I'm just excited I get to use my marketing degree finally. So,
right?
Yeah. So,
and Nancy, to your point about global versus locally, I'm not sure when I started to say this, but I want to say it was during my first compensation role, where I also fell into compensation purely by accident. I used to say the following, and I still apply this model today: global strategy, but operationally locally executed. So the global strategy is there so that we all anchor to something and aspire to something, because at the end of the day, I believe companies want to be unified and have a similar employee experience as we take our talent from one country to the next. They want to identify with the same company, right? And not feel like they're landing in a different company everywhere they go, as we have mobility around the world. Yeah. But to operationally localize that strategy is immensely important without fully deviating from that. So that motto has been, for me, one of the one-liners or even opening slides in any deck that I present to our employees, our C-suite, etc. So I love what you just said.
And one of the questions, I agree. I absolutely love kind of what Nancy was saying. It sounds like job architecture, it sounds like we are seeing that is changing quite a bit. It's becoming, I think over the last several years, it seems like it has really become more and more important. In 2026, what do we think is the main driver for that? Is it the proliferation of continued pay transparency? Is it specifically because employees are now expecting greater transparency and understanding what their career paths look like? Is it because companies are trying to make sure they are capturing an ROI on the employees and the levels they have? Anyone have any guesses as to what the main driver is for 2026 and what may be pushing that forward further? Jack, do you have I think I saw you.
I might chime in on that. Well, we mentioned pay transparency a few times. That's definitely one of the reasons why Some companies are planning, some others are scrambling to put their data house in order, right? But if you think about it, the other strong driver we have right now, which we barely mentioned during webinars and seminars maybe 12 months ago, but that's, to Kat's point, AI adoption. So what I'm seeing is that many companies are striving to get those reward foundations in place in a good state before scaling any AI, because a lot of companies are asking their teams, explain to me how you're going to adopt more of AI in your department and how you're going to enable your team. And we all know that without a solid foundation when it comes to data, that's going to be not just difficult, but dangerous, because any sort of bias or inconsistency that you have already baked in your system is just going to be multiplied by any kind of tool you use. Like, there's no discriminations here. And what those foundations look like, yes, it's definitely job architecture, so standardized job family and levels with appropriate, localizations, as we mentioned, but also market data. I think we need to get to more governed benchmarks with clear sources, refresh cycles, and stronger job matching methodology. And last but not least, pay records, especially if you work for startups. Things can get really messy, and maybe they've changed HRIS systems a few times while they were growing. Pay records can be a nightmare. So consolidating all those info, your base salaries, variable, equity, benefits, into the same place with audit trails, it's really gonna make a difference between an AI that maybe from a model perspective is powerful, is shiny, but then the context it has, it's quite garbage, right? That's going to differentiate that AI from AI that functions as you want it to function.
I love that, Jack, because I think it gets to, right, like the governance piece that we talked about. I feel like that's going to be paramount as we go forward. And I think it's inevitable, Kat. Folks are going to be using AI, both from whether you're embedding it as part of your transformation of your total rewards team, or valuing it, because now how do we value jobs that are augmented with AI, or even further. I mean, McKinsey recently, I think the CEO said, we have 40,000 human employees and we have 20,000 AI employees. So like that's here, So I think deploying AI in a responsible AI, but making sure you're able to kind of show your work, show exactly how you're building those models. I think, Jack, you're really hitting it in that there's just going to be a lot more transparency around that. It's the only way you're going to build trust with people, is to explain how we've built it, how it's coming together to make that recommendation, and then reassuring people too that it's just a recommendation, but we do have, leaders, hiring managers, talent acquisition. They're the ones actually making the decision. The final decision is, something that a human is making.
I love what you just said there, Nancy, because it sparked the thought for me that, we talk about job architecture and job design as sort of the foundation of people programs. I would argue the foundation of business success. Right? People come to work to do a job, having a good understanding of what it is they need to do and designed in a way that drives the business in the direction you're trying to go to is super important. And so, Justin, I think some of the things you rattled off, right, like the pay transparency and legislation, executives, being more involved in this, the introduction of AI and how that might change the way we work as drastically as before internet to internet, right? Before only human employees to now we have a lot of artificial employees. That starts to get us to have these conversations. And I think the one other thing I would add as to why potentially job architecture is a big deal for comp in 2026 is that those conversations, employees are asking a whole lot more questions. Executives are starting to understand the strategic value of it. But that middle management, they're left without enough information to have those daily conversations and advise on the strategy and ease the concerns and motivate employees. So I think that sort of paradigm for the middle management is really where this comp motion is shifting to a lot more of that marketing and comms aligned with the data work that we do and have been doing.
Absolutely. And I love, Catherine, that you said Justin rattled off quite a few things that it was like my brain was just firing off, the pay transparency and AI and compliance. And there's so much, right, that falls within our scope that we work very closely with our business C-suite board of directors. And we're just at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to AI, right? And this is thrown around so easily and so quickly. We're just in the stage of generative AI, right? We're prompting AI to do something for us. And we need to very quickly be ready at the point in time when it becomes agentic, right? What happens when AI becomes autonomous? And so this is why it is so critically important for all the job architectures, all the truth around what you're expected to do in a job, and have that evolve as time evolves, right? Because people's jobs are going to change innately because technology will be leveraged very differently. And I think about, I'm not going to say exactly when it was, again, don't want to age myself, but I was sitting in a classroom and a teacher said, the internet is coming and we're going to be able to shop, bank, plan our travels on these websites, and your entire life is going to be here. And all of us in the classroom said, absolutely not. Are you insane? Is she crazy? And I feel that part of the world out there is thinking AI is not going to do all this. It's not going to be the end all. It's not going to be Wall-E. It's not going to be, they're going to do everything for us. There's still a lot for us humans to feed into the AI tools. So it's very much generative. Very few companies are doing agentic where AI is autonomous. But there are aspects of comp that will become autonomous. And I had worked on a project for a company with incredibly smart people, much smarter than me. I'm always learning and soaking up all this information. And we designed a bot. This was probably about 9 years ago, give or take. And this bot was able to answer all aspects of compensation, benefits, and we have thousands of questions and scenarios. But it was a generative bot that helped you through whatever you were going through at that point in time. So now all of us who are in the leadership and the rest of our team now need to be ready to prepare and work with this AI technology platforms and companies who are doing amazing work in this space to help them get it to the next level, that agentic level, right? To really produce information and engage Kat, because she's about to, wishful thinking, she's about to retire. So Kat, here's where things are. Like, for it to reach out to me and encourage me and tell me all the things that I need to think about. I'm not prompting it. It is prompting me to engage in this strategic planning about the life stage that I'm in. And I think that is really fantastic, but it takes all the things that Jason is doing from a marketing communication standpoint, and it takes that confidence to know, your employee themselves as an individual, where they are in their stage in their life. And I think it's really fascinating, but we're just at that tip of the iceberg for sure.
Well, and there was a study that was done, and I think this kind of goes back to what you were saying, Kat, is 90% of HR leaders believe that AI is going to impact their jobs this year. And I don't just mean their jobs, I mean the jobs of the organization. And I think we are seeing that there is a reduction in the number of entry-level jobs kind of across the board. How do we expect that's going to, how's that going to impact comp teams? Are we just going to get rid of having P1s? Is P2 the new P1? What is that going to do for recruitment? How does that affect career laddering? And then what does that do for kind of recruitment strategies in terms of how we as comp teams work with the different parts of the business to ensure that we still are, or, I guess it's really making a decision. Should we have those junior level roles, or should we outsource those to AI? And if so, how do we ensure that we are still able to bring on more senior people down the road when we need them?
I love this question, Justin, because it helps us be a bit more reflective, reflect on not just how AI will change the compensation function, but how it's going to reflect on us, how it's going to change the way we operate. I think that believing that all junior levels and junior roles will disappear might be a bit far-fetched. I wouldn't go there. However, I do think that with AI getting better and better at getting you the numbers you want, you won't need the same number of analysts to do VLOOKUPs to clean data. But what you will need is analysts that understand the business context. So for instance, if they've calculated the comp ratio, that they can link, the underlying team context when it comes to pay equity with the offer that's being discussed and with the market insight that's being provided by the AI, they'll need that sound judgment. And so, yes, I think life might get a little bit more tougher for junior people because, being great at Excel won't be enough. If anything, might actually not be a key skill or requirement anymore. But it's that sound judgment that will really differentiate those that will be able to progress in their career and those that won't. And I would also add a second thing, and since we're talking about predictions for the future, and this doesn't pertain to junior roles, I think it pertains to the functional role, that regardless of what level you're in. I think we're now all experimenting with prompting, and it's great, but by 2026, I think we'll start to see the era of, the end of the chatbot compensation era. We'll start moving from prompts to embedding AI into workflows. Now, don't get me wrong, that's very, very different from going fully agentic AI with autonomous agents. I think there's a huge governance gap that I think Nancy mentioned, also Kat earlier. It's not going to take a year for us to fully, fill that gap. It might take 5 to 10 years, but we can still make progress while being conscious and smart about the risks. So I think what the most tech savvy teams will do this year, it's not just use, chatbot and prompt and get better at prompting, but automate some of those steps in the workflow with AI for things like context retrieval, recommendation calculation. And you get to a point where you always need a human in the loop, but this new workflow, instead of needing your human attention 100% of the time, which is brain consuming, it will only need it maybe 50%. In those cases that is identified, truly, we need a human in the loop here. And that other 50% of your time, you'll be able to dedicate to developing those skills will be much more hot in the market, starting with sound judgment.
Yeah. Jack, I love essentially what you just articulated, right? Was a job analysis and breaking down the job into its components. And who better to do that than Total Rewards folks, right? Now, and so it actually is, it's making me think back to like FLSA evaluations, which is like, ugh. But when you think about it, right? AI gives us this opportunity to augment jobs, but to also value sort of the pieces of work differently. And then think about where I think what's going to start to happen is, for many years, sort of the automation motion was more highly valued. And now I think, Jack, what you're identifying is it's the human element that's going to be more valued. There'll be a premium placed on human interaction and the opportunity that you actually, like when you talk to the human, that will be the escalation, right? And that's going to be the more valued thing. So I think I love how you're talking about that breakdown, because that's what I'm really interested in. How is job architecture? Like we're all talking about job architecture. I've worked with all the most popular methodologies. They're awesome. But we all know too, with AI, they're going to have to change. So how are we going to embed that in that job architecture work so that we're valuing things in just the right way? And I think there's a lot of opportunity for folks to work with leaders at their companies to have these conversations about what, fundamentally, what do we really value? And then how are we going to execute on that in the, around the business? And like you said, create structures that aren't so much structures as they are systems that can evolve and adapt.
Yeah, it's the soft skills that are going to be more in play. And, AI is going to take away a lot of mechanical work. So job descriptions, survey matching, we all love to do that in our entry level career. And it's going to be more, okay, what is AI can't take away what your company's risk tolerance is. It can't take away internal equity sensitivities, CO cost pressures, D&I initiatives. And so that's where the soft skills, I think we're going to rely more as managers and what we're looking for as far as skill sets to kind of drive that, because once the mechanical goes away, there's going to be more emphasis on those type of initiatives.
What you all have been talking about here for the last few minutes or so has got me thinking about what we saw Moderna do, where the chief people officer took over IT. And I wonder, right, we have the strong partnership from comp with finance, but I wonder if that partnership with IT will grow as we think more about people and technology as sort of one. Maybe not a 2026 thing to see more of that like Moderna. I think there was another organization who did it too, but that hit the headlines. But maybe we start to see some of that partnership get a little bit closer.
Yeah, IBM also tells a similar story. Nicole Lamoureux around when they were implementing AI, and Kat, it's exactly what you were talking about. Using the AI to augment and facilitate those easy sort of questions for HR, removing some of the transactional work, but then also the shift it required in terms of, well, you're taking something away from people, that personal interaction. So what are you replacing it with? And it was, more strategic personal interaction and deploying them in sort of a different way, a higher order sort of work. But I love that, Catherine, that observation that you're seeing. There is more of this collaboration with HR. And I think even within HR too, like one of the things I think about is the convergence. We're over here in the comp silo, talent acquisitions over here in the talent acquisition silo. How is technology helping bring all of these things together? It's a little more seamless, and I think it's going to start to change how we structure a lot of those roles within HR.
Well, it's incredible that pay is the largest expense at any given organization, and oftentimes HR or compensation or benefits, it's an afterthought. And many of us have to really fight for that, proverbial seat at the table. The smart organizations that are successful, that evolve very quickly, that are at the forefront, really truly see HR, total rewards, and those key individuals as part of the business fold, right? And many of us, I'm sure, when we are chatting or going on an interview, starting our careers, we would say, I spend my first 90 days to, even longer than that, immersed in the business. Because in order for us to be effective and do the right things, we need to understand your business. Because whatever we do has to be reflective of that business, because we are part of the thread of the organization, and whatever we design in collaboration with the business, it's to make the business successful. So why wouldn't you have HR as part of your strategic individuals at the table? Why wouldn't board of directors, whole different topic, not have more total rewards and HR leaders as part of the board of directors, so that they can have much more effective and productive discussions at the board level to bring that back into organizations? So there's just so much in that space where, it really becomes this afterthought of something that is the largest expense. And, at the same time, organizations say people are our asset. Well, not when you're actually treating them as an asset. You're treating your machines and you're treating your products a lot more important than the people who are designing and, making that profitable. So it's an interesting, dilemma there and dynamic. So it's really wonderful. And I've been part of organizations where HR was really, really part of the thread of the business strategy. And to me, those are the ones that really get it right. And with the upskilling and the ambiguity that will come very quickly our way because of the AI impact, it's going to be critically important for these organizations to have the right individuals in HR and in rewards and a lot of other space, talent acquisition, et cetera. And communication is going to be a critical aspect of this.
And with that, I think there's an opportunity for us to improve the perception the compensation functions has with business. We've talked about how skills might change, that the value, your value as a compensation person, might not be with hoarding data for the business anymore, but explaining the why behind the numbers. And we said it's going to take more commercial acumen, but also understanding of the human element, right? But I think there's an additional driver that's going to change the relationship we have with the business and the perceived value we have, right? Because you probably came across, a few people in the business that see us as gatekeepers, right? And I think that's an oversimplification of the job of compensation. But what is happening now with tools like Cloud Code, which essentially are no code to low code tools. Other people might call it vibe coding, right? The barriers to technical enablement are coming down. So I think, Catherine, you mentioned earlier that Moderna bringing IT and HR together. I'd be really curious to see what happens there, right? Because if the barriers to technical enablement come down, it means that compensation people, as well as HR people, they won't need to interact with the technical folks to build dashboards and tools anymore. Potentially, they'll be able to build their own micro apps. Now, again, with all the risks involved, but we know better than IT about the risk when it comes to these sort of things. So it's more going to be a partnership where we're asking them to review something rather than us asking them to build something for us. Again, we're talking about predictions, but I can see a lot of power in these tools, a lot of risk as well. But I also see more and more people in the compensation space experimenting them and actually building proof of concept apps that will rewire and change our relationship with the business, especially when it comes to engineering department, IT, and maybe even product.
Well, I think that's one of the interesting things that, on our side, on the software side, we keep hearing about this notion of software on demand, where you can vibe code really very complicated tools. And there are limitations to it. And most engineers, every engineer I've talked to said, yeah, that's great, but it's not going to be scalable necessarily. It may give you a good proof of concept, but it's not necessarily going to give you a full-blown application that could replace a merit planning tool or a market pricing tool or a job description management tool. But I wonder if we do think that maybe in the latter part of 2026, that applications on demand could become much more prevalent. It's something that I would not honestly be shocked. And then if so, where does the value come from? Is it now just the value is the data versus the tool that holds that data?
Yeah. I love that, Justin, because there is sort of this, it's the build versus buy conversation that I think, tons of companies are having, but it is sort of this, there's a bunch of different elements of that, right? So to your point, there's the data piece, there's making sure that there's proper governance around it. So the scaling, I think, comes from, it's really around the governance and the trust that you're able to build into it. Making sure that you're meeting all the compliance needs. So I think that's a whole other dimension of things where, so many different jurisdictions are coming out with their own version, right, of what governance looks like around AI, and talk about, the most sensitive decisions you could make being compensation ones. We have to make sure, we're getting that right for people's financial well-being. So I think there's a lot of that. But it's hard because I think too, there's that, building the plane while you're flying it going on at a lot of organizations as they rationalize what is our AI policy, how are we incorporating, so I'm watching different folks that I've seen, they're navigating and getting close to those folks in IT and compliance around AI deployment at their organizations. And I feel like, especially for total rewards folks, the sooner you can do that, the better. Get to know buddy up with them, understand, where sort of what their point of view is, so that you can do, like Jack is saying, some of that, the building and the experimenting and that augmentation to your jobs, because I think I think there's an opportunity for folks to co-create and kind of learn together. And I think that it's a great opportunity.
Well, we've got about 13 minutes left, and there have been a lot of really good comments and questions in the comment section now. So I'd like to take some time to kind of go through those. I told everybody that we are paying attention to them. So I want to make sure we actually address them now. And I think the first one that I'd like to address is Alexandra Fogel's question. So with all these predictions and trends that are happening, how have we changed our comp philosophy? Have we put in AI-related metrics? Are we changing what the responsibilities are for the comp team? Are we looking at different ROIs based on each employee now? I'd love to kind of hear, Jason. I haven't heard from you in a minute, so yeah. I'll pick on you now.
Well, it doesn't happen until it happens, but I guess if it's going to impact your compensation philosophy, and I really can't speak for Gallagher's compensation philosophy. I'm not at that level, so but yeah, it's definitely something to consider in my talks with clients. If they're ever going to make a move like that, if AI is becoming something more prevalent in their organization, then that's something they probably need to think about. So I don't think I can really speak to it in the real, from real world experience, since I was in industry before AI, but that's about what I've got to say about that, I think.
Yeah, I think what I would add there is that I feel like comp philosophies in a lot of organizations live in the back of someone's mind, or maybe kind of in a closed conference room groupthink mind. And I think that AI and data transparency is sort of forcing us to document it and start talking about it, be a little bit more forward with, this is why we're making these decisions based on this data, this target market, what it means for us. And so if I were to say anything, I would probably predict that a lot more comp teams are getting into those conversations around business strategy and saying, okay, well, how do we then translate that to the comp philosophy and how we help motivate employee behavior, and help everybody along that career path, different levels of leadership in having those conversations, the good, bad, and the ugly ones.
Catherine, that is so spot on. And it's so sad when organizations keep the comp philosophy in the back room. This should be your very first slide anytime you are at a town hall that is going to talk about compensation. At any year-end process, as you're kicking that off, remind folks, have an intranet that opens up with your comp philosophy, right? And innately, as the business evolves, that comp philosophy may change, right? Are we targeting a different percentile for our midpoint, our control point? Have we changed our peer group, et cetera, et cetera? I don't want to, focus on that one. But in terms of Alexandra's questions, yes, it should absolutely change. But the change that really comes first is all those things that we have talked about, which is, has our job architecture changed? Have job, evaluations gone through? What is it that we want to say to be open and honest about what that philosophy is, because it is reflective of our business and how we're going to pay you. By the way, let's be real, pay transparency, the very, very first stage of pay transparency is, please tell me how you make decisions. It's not about opening your books and showing me salary structures. Please just help me understand how you make decisions. There was about 2 years ago, World at Work, or maybe SHRM. I know SHRM could be an interesting one to mention, but I will say it. They do have some good magazines and journals. And they talked about pay transparency. I think it was about 2 years ago. And they talked about, with full honesty, the different stages of pay transparency. And it really, really starts with, please just tell me how you make this decision. And do you make it consistently across the organization? Your comp philosophy is your starting point to share how those decisions were made.
No, I love it, love it. Let's hop to another question. So this one is from Greg Williams, and I'd be curious if anyone thinks this has changed. What's the most effective job evaluation methodology for 2026? How would you scale them if you have to do this for your entire organization?
I know I can say from a lot of the folks we know that are working on the EU Pay Transparency Directive, I'm not going to name, say, one job methodology, but I'm going to say that certainly some of the more popular ones are really good at making those differences between levels, very clear. They're very clear on the factors. They're making sure those factors are gender neutral. All sort of really critical components for complying with the EU Pay Transparency Directive. And I think it's something that, again, thankfully, you have some great methodologies there. It's interesting talking about scaling it for the entire organization. Honestly, I guess my recommendation now, things move so fast. I think there are some diagnostics you can do initially to see kind of how broken it is in certain spots, and then focus on your hot spots first. And, or, for instance, some companies are just simply prioritizing working on it in the EU because they know they're going to have to be more transparent and have that language really buttoned up and make sure that they're paying the way they say they pay for those areas. But I would say, scale it bit by bit. I do feel that it's very hard to kind of stop the presses. We're going to do the whole thing, and then we're going to have the reveal, at compensation planning. Like I think it's just very hard for companies. They really have to move much more quickly. So if you could be working on it in chunks and do maybe rollouts of pieces of it, you're probably better off.
Yeah, like job family chunks.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
I also wanted to touch on, the job evaluation methods I've used. I started my career in the Hay Group. Right? It's one of the, if not the first, I believe, and then went to Mercer. So I've seen a couple of GE approaches, both as a consultant and as an in-house practitioner. And what I've noticed is that most of these traditional methodologies, they still overweight factors like accumulated knowledge, especially Hay, managerial, technical, but also headcount, because you're all required to size your organization, right, before you get into actual job evaluation. And I'm a bit worried because if I speak to people in the venture capital space, the startups, the most successful startups nowadays are not bragging because they've hired 100 people. They're bragging because they're a team of one doing the work of 100 people. So the issue there becomes to be an effective job evaluation methodology, you have to somewhat move from 20th century rulers and thinking to 21st century ways of working, right? Because, and yes, we can blame AI again for this, but a lot is changing the way we do work, and so this will push job evaluation to modernize to an extent that I think we have never seen before, or at least not in the last 100 years when they started coming about.
Hop to one more question from Rebecca Newbury, if I can find it. But the question is essentially, here we are. Where are the biggest gaps between policy and reality in pay, bonuses, and benefits in 2026? Where do we think those biggest gaps are going to be? My guess, I'll go first. My guess is it's what can the new technology do versus what should it do. If you go back to Jurassic Park, it's a question of they can build it, but they never asked if they should build it. There are certainly places where the compensation team should remain in full control. I like to kind of suggest that, AI is a horse and comp teams are the cowboys, right? So we can't keep the reins, but the horse will get us there a little bit more quickly, and maybe we'll be a little bit less tired when we do get there. But in my perspective, I think the biggest gap is really the perception of what should we be doing versus what are we doing with AI? So what are those limitations? And I think in some cases, they're going to be greater than we think. We should actually go further than we are. And there's going to be other scenarios where we should really rely on AI less than we are. I'm curious if anybody else has a different opinion.
I think it's going to be the ROI piece, and that's going to, and so it's sort of, there's a chicken and the egg going on right now, because people want to know what the ROI is going to be on the investment, and yet they need to make the investment in order to calculate the ROI. So there's a little bit of that. So I think it's part of that speed. It's all about speed. Put some things into play, experiment, and then calculate that ROI, and then that'll help you sort of map the path of, like you're saying, Justin, what's really worth it, and then what you learn along the way, which is there's still a lot we just don't know, right, as we put things into play. And so do you have that, are you building in that feedback loop, so you're making sure you're collecting that information? But I do think we're going to be much more scientific about how we manage comp go forward, because we're going to need all of those pieces to be working together.
Agreed.
Agree. And I think what I would add, just what you sparked the idea for me, right, Nancy, around, needing the investment to be able to sort of show the ROI, to then be able to justify the investment again, if you will. And I wonder, this is probably not how you phrase this question in terms of getting a response like this, but I wonder if the biggest gap is really courage in sort of making the investment and looking under the hood, and then saying, I'm going to look under the hood and do something about whatever I see. And so maybe that's the biggest gap, is we have a lot of fear of what the reality is, and we think our policies are protecting us from that, but it's time for us to lift the hood. And I'd love to see a lot more executive teams close that gap.
Yeah. Well, and Kat, there's one question I think you wanted to answer, and then we will be pretty much at the top of the hour. So I'd love to close out with the question that I think you had mentioned you wanted to grab.
Yeah, and it just really segues nicely into, Catherine, what you just said, courage. I was at a conference where the head of Total Rewards, I will not mention the organization, but it is a very global, extremely well-known technology company. And he was up there with an economist who is doing phenomenal work in the workspace of paid transparency. And he said something that really hit my heart and my mind in a way that I was not expecting. He said, I regret not being courageous enough to really speak up and really be more influential to my board of directors and C-suite around why it is important to have fair pay, why it is important to take a look at benefits, why it is important for us to really redesign bonuses, and why it is so critically important to have the level of pay transparency, because it's not only the right thing and noble thing to do today, but it's also a compliance issue that is going to hit us, full throttle very, very, very quickly. And our employees have a lot of access to public data where they're putting these pieces together, that they're feeling a certain way. And so it would cause retention, it would cause, discomfort. And so the question is sort of around, the C-suite is not actually aligned to what we're presenting. It's just fancy paper, and signatures don't equal buy-in. True alignment is getting them to own it, not just approve it. So what is the secret to recognize the human element and not just the financial impact? Have courage. Because that person, that top global total rewards leader, sat there and said, for years, I was not courageous. And when I decided to be courageous, everything changed. And for the last few years, they've been able to enjoy so many other benefits from that, being courageous and having that. So that hit. Thank you, Catherine. I just went like this, So be courageous in everything that you're doing and tackling.
I love that. That is a great note to end on too. So for the next 2 weeks, everyone has to be courageous until we all get back together for another Pay Practitioners panel. But again, thank everyone for spending an hour together today. Everyone on the panel, Catherine, Kat, Jason, Ashley, Jack, and Nancy, really appreciate your time, as does everybody else that joined us. We'll look forward to seeing everyone else in the next 2 weeks, where we'll pick up another topic. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.